So I was actually going to start this video in the dark, but before I could do that, my cat here, Tommy, insisted on being part of the video. You'll see, he's a very handsome man. Say hello. Say hello to the internet. We'll get to comics in just a sec. I just wanted to show you this is life. Yeah. Uh-huh. Anyway, please enjoy this moment of reality. Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, I've elected to just go ahead and do a little bit of talking because he's clearly not going anywhere, and people like cats, apparently. So, you'll note right off the bat, we're kind of in the dark here, and there might also be some Family Guy coming in through the background. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to close my door, hence the cat. Anyway, the lights are off because tonight we're actually going to be discussing a book that I keep talking about over and over and over again, and that is Sean Murphy's Batman White Knight. Now, this book, fun fact, was actually going to be the book that was going to be read during the May meeting of the Graphic Novel Appreciation Society that meets up at Ground Zero Comics, my hometown comic shop. But then COVID-19 kind of happened, so May came up, and I was like, you know what? We're probably not going to get a chance to read it, so already bought it. Might as well. Now, first off, I should let everyone know I really don't care too much about spoilers, and so but I recognize that some people do, and especially given the fact that this is a Batman book, there is a rabid fan base around this. So if you haven't read the book yet, but you want to, you're probably going to want to just stop now, because I'm going to get into the intricacies of the plot, examine certain details of it, and I'm going to just quote passages from the beginning, middle, and end. So, if spoilers are not your thing, or if you don't appreciate, hey, you know, if you don't want anything to get spoiled, oh, now he leaves, you might want to go ahead and cut the video off, because, again, I take consideration for you, my viewer, when I'm doing this. For those of you who just want to stick around and check out this comic book, let's get started. Alright. He left. So, if you've never read Batman White Knight before, the plot of the book is essentially that the Joker, air quote, goes sane. Now, as somebody who struggles personally with mental illness, and somebody who has a lot of friends who struggle with mental illness, and somebody who understands mental illness is a lot more complex than simply just sane and insane, I really don't like that selling point. But it's a comic book, so we have to deal with that language. Anyway, the general concept is the Joker, aka Jack Napier, has effectively gone sane. What happens is the Joker leads Batman on a chase, gets Batman really angry, and then at some point during the exchange, Batman forces a bunch of pills down Joker's throat. Now, the pills are kind of a MacGuffin. It's a structure designed so that you don't really think about it too much. It just pulls the character forward. A good example of this, of course, is the suitcase from Pulp Fiction. You don't know what's in it, and you don't really need to know what's in it. With the pills that effectively cure Joker's psychosis, he becomes Jack Napier again. And one of the interesting things about him is that he's apparently a genius. So much so that he reconciles with the original Harley Quinn. He effectively runs for a city council position, and then slowly but surely begins to try to correct a lot of the woes of Gotham. But at the same time, he brainwashes a bunch of the villains in the Batman universe by using the Mad Hatter's mind-controlling top hat and also using Clayface. There's actually a very disturbing, albeit brilliant, scene in which you actually see them plotting this plan out. And of course, I won't be able to pull it. I should have marked it before. Oh, here it is. The general thought is they basically boil Clayface down into sand and then slip it into the drinks of every villain in Gotham City, combining all their forces together and creating a distraction from Batman. Well, People began to question Batman's methods, they began to question the expenses that Batman causes on the public, and people began to side with Napier till it eventually kind of boils into this huge confrontation against Batman where they basically capture him, throw him in Arkham Asylum. And that would normally be the end of it, were it not for the fact that there's two Harley Quinns. And this is an interesting dynamic, I think, and from a character perspective, because the new Harley Quinn, who tends to dress very scantily, is supposedly the second Harley Quinn, and she hates Joker's transformation, so she essentially takes Gotham City hostage, in which case then, surprise, surprise, Joker and Batman have to team up to beat Harley Quinn. That's the book. And of course, because it's also a Batman book, Joker has to return to being Joker by the end of the story. Now, I said that I would review this book partly because I don't really have a fundamental guiding philosophy with these books, or I really don't have a rating system with the books that I read. I know there's a lot of people online that review books, say, I liked this, I didn't like this, I liked this, I didn't like this, 5 out of 10. Everybody's already doing that. So this video these video sequences are more about, hey, this is what I'm reading and I kind of like it because it's a good example of what you can do with comics, so let's talk about it. So let me emphasize here, this is the first Batman graphic novel I'm doing on this channel, but that's not because I think it's the best. Honestly and truthfully, if we were doing like one of my favorite Batman graphic novels, it would be Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison. The fact that I haven't done any Grant Morrison so far is nothing short of a miracle because he's my boy. But nonetheless, I finished this book recently. I thought it would be a fun one to talk about because even though I'm not a terribly big fan of the Batman character or the Batman mythos, or honestly and truthfully really fans of Batman fans, because nevertheless, this was a really interesting read, and one of the reasons is predominantly because of Sean Murphy. Now, if you've never heard of Sean Murphy, he's done a lot of he's done a lot of work. For example, he worked with Scott Snyder on The Wake. Tokyo Ghost, which is put out by Image Comics, is one of his creations, but probably one of my favorites of all time is a Vertigo graphic novel called Punk Rock Jesus. Now, this was written and illustrated by Sean Murphy himself, and the general premise is that a reality TV show producer effectively clones Jesus of Nazareth, as in Jesus Christ, and then films his life as a reality show. It's wild, it's crazy, it's ridiculous, and it's still probably one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. So Sean Murphy writing a Batman book and illustrating a Batman book too, that was just perfection personified, or at least a really interesting opportunity to give this character another chance. Because again, like I said a second ago, for me, biggest impediment to Batman is not the universe, it's not the characters. Far more often, it's the people around Batman. It's much the way I unapologetically adore Rick and Morty, but I can't stand Rick and Morty fans. So, approaching this book, I'm just going to acknowledge one really important thing, is that I like Batman, but I like Batman from the position of I don't care about the intricacies of the continuity. It doesn't bother me. My biggest selling point is, are you doing anything interesting with the medium, and is the story entertaining? So again, if that's not your thing, sorry, but again, this channel is about comics, not just superhero comics or rating comics. So I'm going to grab a couple of scenes from the book that I think are really interesting from a comics perspective and talk about them. Alright, so looking at Batman White Knight, I guess what's really important first off is trying to understand how well does it work as a comic book. And the answer, of course, is it's Sean Murphy. He's a seasoned professional, or he's a professional. You don't need the word seasoned in there. He's not a steak, for God's sakes. Murphy is a professional, and he's somebody who, at this point in his career, has been behind a lot of projects and made a lot of comics. But he's also a very stylistic creator in the fact that his work is so unique, and the moment you see just one page of a Sean Murphy book, you remember who Sean Murphy is. looking at this panel right here, and I've got to be careful, the pages are kind of glossy, so of course my lamp here is going to make it a little difficult to read here, but you don't need to see all the details just to be able to observe that there's a lot happening in this one page. This is a scene in which Jack Napier is just been thrown back into Arkham Asylum. His mind is kind of returning to him, and we're able to see all just the bat junk that completely surrounds it. There's a lot of detail going into just that one page, and at times it can be kind of crazy to see the amount of material that's going into it. Like, I don't know if you were able to observe it very well, because I'm kind of moving all about the place, but right here you see a small collection of Batmobiles. Also, I was a 90s kid, so I gotta point out, anybody miss or not notice the Batman animated series poster behind Joker? The nerd in me goes out to that. But you can kind of observe from that Sean Murphy's approach in this panel, and then sometimes even in some of the smaller panels, like on the next page when they're in the study room of Wayne Manor. There's a lot of details sometimes being shoved into these panels. So in terms of just the visual effects, the reader at times has to struggle a little bit against the art. And let me be clear here, I'm not talking down about Murphy's style. I actually really like it because sometimes the fun parts of these books are slowing down and having to just absorb all the details that can be in a single panel on a single page. Whether it's a whole page panel, or even if it's just one small rectangular panel. You see so much of this world, and there's so many pen strokes going into making it. Now, at the same time, what that can do, or the effect that can have on the reader, is the fact that there's a real sense of possibility and realness to the world. Murphy tends to like his worlds either really, really gritty or nasty and used, or else really, really kind of complex, pretty, ornate. An example of this is, at one point, Commissioner Gordon is speaking with a judge, and she's discussing what Jack Napier is doing. Again, the lighting, I probably shouldn't have done this in the dark, but even then, this is a pretty dark panel, but you can kind of observe we have Jack Napier here against a microfilm machine. Yes, that is a microfilm machine, which, working in a library, I feel really represented here by that. But then also, more importantly, we see this big winding staircase. We see shelves after shelves of books. It's kind of hard to see, but tucked there into the background, we see a security guard. This is a real room, and it feels real because of the amount of detail and line work and dedication that Murphy goes into making this page what it is. So, right off the bat, again, what's really interesting in terms of this book as a comic is there's so much attention dedicated to each panel. It would be really easy to just make Joker a floating head in front of a computer screen, or just put a small stack of books next to him. That would be one approach of creating a scene. Murphy's attempt usually is to create a real, detailed, intricate visual that just strikes the reader so that you feel absolutely enveloped in Gotham. And I can say this page after page after page, it's impossible not to just feel the world around him, the space that these characters are occupying. It's nothing short of amazing, the level of detail that's going into it. Or even this beautiful spread where we see kind of, well, let's be honest, that's a ripoff of Citizen Kane, but there's still a lot of interesting attention paid to the composition of this page. Now, along with that, what's really important about Murphy is that he's very much an action-to-action artist, which, again, as I pointed in the Understanding Comics video like a couple weeks back, action-to-action means we're not watching second by second by second by second. We're watching big, sweeping, Kirby-esque punches. But in this case, it's often more car chases with a wide variety of Batmobiles, one of which I had to mark simply because I geeked out far more than I probably should have. In a later passage of the book, they break out all the old Batmobiles, including, I don't know if you can see this here, the Adam West Burt Ward 60s Bat-2C Batmobile. Like, that's how much fan service is going on in this book. And I don't care. It's gorgeous, and I got to watch the Adam West Batmobile that I used to watch all the time as a kid, like, rolling alongside the Christopher Nolan Batmobile. It's, again, it's fan service, but it's a nice touch. And also, more importantly, it then also goes later on to create some interesting composition choices, because again, we then see this panel layout, which is simply gorgeous. You're able to observe at this moment that each of these characters contained within a bubble is in their own unique Batmobile, and somehow or another, each one of these characters winds up in a Batmobile that is somehow very sympathetic with their character. But I also really wanted to pull out this 2-page spread to demonstrate how effective Murphy is at showing action sequences. We have automatopoeias, we've got cloudbursts, we've got just, again, small aspects of composition which give the reader this real feeling of dramatic tension. You feel like you're in these Batmobiles. And the reason, again, is because Murphy knows how to arrange the panels, how to push the reader through the book, so that even if you're in one of those just sort of ornate visual landscapes, your eyes are still drawn to these characters. Now, it's not perfect. In fact, I actually pulled aside one page in the book. Let me see if I can find it. Ah, yes. There's this sequence here where Harley Quinn, the, how you say, crazy Harley Quinn, not the original Harley Quinn. I know, it's kind of confusing. That's another plot hole in this book, but that's more from a writing perspective, which I'm not really going to worry about here. But at one point, Harley Quinn decides to sneak into Jack Napier's office to figure out how to get him back to being the Joker again, because again, he's regularly taking medication, which basically cures him of his psychosis. You'll note on this panel, just this page right here, it's kind of hard to pull your focus in, because you have this really interesting visual of Clayface basically being kind of like a zombie with his long tongue hanging out, but at the same time, there's nothing really drawing the reader's view into the page. You have this gorgeous panel with Clayface, but then nothing is really propelling you forward. You have this wide shot where Harley Quinn's right here, and you've got Mad Hatter, and then she takes it off, and he wakes up. It's not really an interesting page visually. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but at the same time, it's then immediately followed up with these 2 pages, which are stunningly gorgeous and are far more accessible to the reader. So one of the, I would argue, maybe a flaw, maybe, if I don't really like using that word, but one of the effects of this book is you're able to see Murphy is really great at composition in terms of comics, but at the same time, there's also little moments in his style where his attention to detail or his structuring is just kind of, it pulls you out. So there are times when, as a reader, I'm following every second of this book, and then others, I'm kind of pushing myself through the book. Again, something like seeing Clayface's eyes, tongue, and brain is a really great panel. It's a really great image, and the fact that the panel is arranged as a spill-off is even better, because it makes me feel a kind of timelessness to this. But then again, I've only gotten to that after kind of floating through a subpar page. Again, one bad page in a comic book doesn't mean the book isn't worth your time. I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't think this book was worth your time. But it's important to recognize that the book isn't always dynamic in every single page. But one really more important thing, and I've kind of addressed it already, is this book is just visually gorgeous. Because even when there are passages that are not progressing the plot forward, granted, this panel is, you get these moments that are almost aspect to aspect. And if you remember, again, from the panel layout designs that Scott McCloud talked about, that's when you're not really seeing moment by moment, action by action. You're getting just these odd moments of atmosphere which build to a space. And again, if you're talking about a Batman book, like, you have to have that. Because Batman, even though it is very much action-driven, action-oriented, Batman is very much a mood. It's an aesthetic. It's an atmosphere. You know what it feels like when you're reading a Batman book because you're dealing with something very definitively gothic and dark and just overall nasty. And Sean Murphy delivers Batman in spades sometimes with just one panel or one shot. I don't think there's really much more I had to say. I marked one or two pages. Oh, again, aspect to aspect. Again, this is more an action sequence, but the shot of Batman just leaping off of a building and firing, just, it's a masterwork, and you can see how much Murphy loves the character of Batman and he loves the story he's talking about. And on the note of story, I guess it is important just to kind of address my own sort of personal opinion on this matter. I really loved this book because, honestly and truthfully, I get tired of the Joker. The character in and of itself started off as just a guy who wore clown makeup and robbed banks. There really wasn't anything really unique or interesting about him. As time has gone on, however, the Joker has become kind of just this mythic antithesis to Batman to the point he's almost untouchable. It's almost impossible to tell a basic Joker story. And I mean basic by the sense of making him feel like a human being. Now, I might be pointing the finger a little bit at Scott Snyder here, but at the same time I have every intention of talking about the Death in the Family graphic novel. But what's really unique to me about Batman White Knight is there feels like a real return to humanity. Batman makes mistakes. At one point, he falls for a trap. Like, Batman falls for a trap. That's huge. And then, more to the point, he's constantly being questioned by everyone around him. Everybody starts to doubt Batman. Everybody starts to wonder, is this really the good thing to do? And an interesting dynamic in this book, as Scott Snyder points out, the billions of property damage that is caused yearly by Batman. Now again, The Incredibles movie kind of pointed to that a little bit, and other people have brought that issue up over time, but it was still used in an effective way, again, to chip at the armor of Batman in a narrative way that then ultimately served the purpose to see Napier's arc before eventually ending with his death. And one final thing as well, which is that the very end of the book ends with Bruce Wayne revealing his true identity to Commissioner Gordon. This is a trope that gets used in a lot of Batman books, and in fact, Batman's secret identity is kind of like the open secret that nobody wants to acknowledge, because it seems like every other book he's revealing his identity or someone's figured out his identity. It's not so much a solid structure anymore. But what is interesting to me about Batman White Knight is the fact that it felt fresh. And that's really what I felt was strong about this book, not solely just its strength as a comic. It's the fact that it's able to take a character like Batman and an character struggle like Batman versus Joker, which has been done just ad nauseum, and somehow managed to make it real. And I suspect part of that is just Murphy's approach to writing, and then just the visual style of this book, which gives you the feeling that this is a Batman book. This is a Batman universe, but he's trying to do something new and original with it. One last thing, and then I promise I'm going to shut up and I'll do my final so what, and you can go back and watch Scandal, because yes, Scandal's good. I'm told. Anyway, watch Scandal. There's one aspect of this book that did disappoint me severely, but it's nothing on Sean Murphy's part. It's anything you can really do about it, but there is a Mr. Freeze arc. And look, I get people like the Joker. I get people like to see stories with the Joker. But Mr. Freeze is really cool. Like, he's like my favorite Batman, air quotes, villain. And nobody Nobody, as far as I can tell, has done a major story arc of a Batman book where Mr. Freeze is the villain. He's always just like this weird side character, or he's somebody's lackey, or he's there to help Batman, and then he very quickly disappears. Or in this book, he helps Batman, and then he basically loses his iciness. He becomes human again, and then he becomes super old. And then he does help Batman in the end, but then he dies. And it's like, again, why won't somebody just, like, sack up and write a Mr. Freeze book? Please. As a would-be, want-to-be Batman fan, please write a Mr. Freeze story. Please. Paul Dini wrote one really great one, and now we still care about Mr. Freeze, so it can be done. Okay. Breathe. Sorry. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I was going to say why you should care about this book. I'll do that in just a moment. All right. I don't really have too much to say because I've more or less said most of it. But again, what I feel is really interesting about Batman White Knight is, narratively speaking, it brings a freshness, or at least what feels like a new energy, to a character who, honestly, it's like that joke from Rocko's Modern Life when they do a Dracula remake. It's been done to death. Sometimes it feels like there really isn't any new energy in Batman because so many people have pointed out all the flaws, and sometimes he's become a bloated self-parody of himself. And sometimes it's just because, oh great, another Batman story. But I think what this book shows is that perception has far more to do with a lot of the capitalism that surrounds Batman rather than the character itself. Again, what's really fun and really interesting about comics is you can tell any story you want to, really without any limitations. And if the career of Grant Morrison isn't proof enough of that, I don't know what is. So when approaching a character like Batman, it's really important that there be a real sense of conviction, because everybody has read crappy Superman stories. Everybody's read awful Flash stories. Everybody's read plenty of terrible Green Lantern books, and I can't even begin to count on one hand the number of awful Batman stories that I have read. But that's because sometimes people aren't really interested in doing anything original with the character. There was an Amber Alert literally right in the middle of my interesting monologue, so of course now I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Oh yes. It all comes down to conviction. With something like a Batman book, there's untold number of stories that can be told with this character, and Batman White Knight is a really good example of that, because it's a story that I feel like I've heard before, but the energy that is brought to it, the kind of retconning he's doing, and then just the sheer level of visual play that is at heart in this book is reason enough to pick it up off the shelves. Go to your local comic book shop. Check out a copy of Batman White Knight. I guarantee you they're going to have a copy of this because I think it was actually nominated for an Eisner, but don't quote me on that directly. And also don't forget, if you don't have a local comic book shop in your area, check out your local public library, because even if they don't have graphic novels, they probably have an interlibrary loan system. I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching. This was a really weird video from start to end, so thank you for staying with it through the whole thing. At least it started with a cat, right? As always, please like, share, and subscribe. One, because it helps me out, but then far more importantly, it lets me know that you're actually watching these. And as always, too, if you have a book that you're interested in, or just like the channel and want to talk about comics, leave a comment below. I would love to hear what you have to say. I would love to talk with somebody. I'm so lonely. Please, leave a comment. It makes me feel loved and appreciated at the very, very least. Thank you for watching again. Go read some comics. Watch some comics? Shut up.